Significantly throughout the world, many organisations, including in Australia, are trying to develop indicators of wellbeing. These indicators of wellbeing, or of happiness in some places, give us a new insight into what really is human wellbeing. Up until more recent times, we as a society have judged our own wellbeing on a very narrow indicator. In Australia, and particularly in the 70s, 80s and 90s, we've used GDP per head of population as the single most important measure to define whether or not Australia and other nations are enhancing their wellbeing. GDP per head of population is in fact the measure of living standards. And for so long as that measure continued to increase, we believed that human wellbeing was advancing. Indeed, it was critical and central to all of government policies over the last 2 to 3 decades. But today, all institutions, including Commonwealth Treasury and our own organisation, now recognise that whilst that remains an exceptionally important indicator, it is an insufficient indicator. Today, throughout the world, we are trying to understand what are the indicators that tell us whether or not societies and communities, and I suggest individuals, are in fact advancing their human circumstances. This is a work in progress, and for as much as good is about it, there is a whole lot of stuff that is also very problematic and dangerous with it. Dangerous because people are trying to do too much with it. Dangerous because people are trying to make a robustness in these measures to counter or to be similar to that of economic indicators, and will often fail to be able to achieve that and bring into disrepute some of these concepts. Nevertheless, they are absolutely critical. So we're looking at human wellbeing in Australia. Going back to the early days, we would have measured it in very important terms, in terms of access to housing, affordable housing, access to education, access to adequate food, access to water, all of those sorts of things, all of which remain important today. And if you look at the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, they have a welfare and wellbeing indicator which picks all those up. Issues in relation to income, disposable income, is critically important. If you look at the report that I'm responsible for, which is the report on overcoming Indigenous disadvantage in Australia, which is produced on behalf of the 9 governments every 2 years, you will see we use those sorts of indicators. There are 7 strategic areas of actions. We look at access to health and education. We look at access to housing and so on and so forth. But that only took us part of the way. So what are some of the domains of wellbeing? Some of them are these: a sense of self. An individual has a sense of themselves, who they are, where they fit, and a sense of confidence that they themselves are valued and important. Consumption, the ability to be able to consume, to acquire goods and services, is a very important element of wellbeing. There's no beauty in being poor, but one of the reasons being poor is a problem is that it distracts you from the ability to enjoy, or denies you the ability to be able to enjoy those things that others are able to enjoy. A third one is engagement in meaningful activity. People that are actively engaged in other activity, meaningful activity, well-being is always seems to be enhanced. And there are proxy indicators that we use in Indigenous communities for that. Let me give you an example of that. One of the most important elements in Indigenous communities is building resilience within communities. What is the measure for that? Well, the measure is a proxy. And the proxy measure for that is active involvement in cultural and sporting programs. Why? Because if one is actually engaged with other people in an organised form of activity, be it cultural, arts or sports, it is likely to be a demonstration that the community has an inner strength. And where that dissipates and there is less involvement in formalised sport, cultural or arts, it is less likely to have that level of resilience. The fourth domain of well-being is around connectedness to others. Our ability to feel well about ourselves, good about ourselves, is absolutely related to our ability to connect with other people. The fifth one is the ability to exert influence. We feel and are enhanced if we have an ability to exert influence. Very interestingly, in relation to workplace arrangements today, that the single most important determiner of a staff member's well-being is whether or not they believe that they have some ability to influence the work that they actually do. And if they feel that they're empowered to make decisions in relation to their work, they're enhanced by it. But so too in our community. And the last is safety from personal harm. These 6 domains are domains of well-being. Now, why are they absolutely critical at the present time? Is because they will reshape the way in which we measure the impact of the work that we do and the advocacy that we provide. Today, when we look at the Benevolent Society, for example, we ask the questions of people not simply whether or not they received the particular service, whether the service was provided in a satisfactory manner, but inbuilt into the quality evaluations now are questions about, do you feel more secure in your community? Do you feel more empowered to make decisions? Do you feel more ability to exercise influence? These questions actually now inform our view as to whether or not we're achieving the outcomes for people. Today in Victoria, the Department of Planning and Communities, if it's currently called that, has a huge agenda in relation to trying to measure what is a strong community. It's groundbreaking work. Again, if you look at those questions, they are fundamentally questions that go to the domains of well-being. And so, this 4th period that we're in is in fact trying to come up with social policies and public policies that actually achieve these goals. Yes, they still continue to deal with the basics of human life, but they are now actually targeted to the person's sense of well-being and that of the communities. This agenda is absolutely kindred to those of the faith-based communities. If we look at the social teachings of various churches, if we look at the raison d'etre of faith-based organisations, what are they about? They are about the notion of subsidiarity, allowing the lowest level, including the individuals, to be able to exercise choice, to be able to make decisions that affect their own well-being. What are they all about? They're about the sense of community and connectedness, both within faith and beyond faith. They are absolutely central to the task of building communities.